Thank you for joining me in this video covering the sketching application. This video is a beginner's introduction to the intersections and line and offsets tools. For advanced training and all the functions available, contact Power Design's Total Station Specialist directly. You will not need your Total Station or tablet for this video, as I will be using the simulator to present the examples used. The sketching application can be found on the Icon Software's home screen within the Applications palette. If it does not appear here on your tablet, toggle it on through User Permissions. You may refer to Video 6 for a refresher on user permissions. Selecting the sketching icon takes us to the map view. If you do not see any points or lines on your map view to select, check that they are turned on through your Layer Manager. Refer to Video 15 for a refresher on the Layer Manager. If no CSV or DXF files appear in your Layer Manager, ensure that they have been properly loaded to the job associated with the floor you are working on, within the project you were working on, and that you are currently working in the correct project and job. If you touch lines in the background and nothing happens, make sure you have your data loaded as reference data and not background images. You may visit Video 7 for a refresher on project setup and organization. The purpose of the sketching application is the creation of points and lines in the field as needed. The most common use in our line of work is the creation of control offsets when we only have one intersection of control lines on a deck, or when our other intersections are covered. A similar but less common use is the creation of a point for layout because of field conditions and ensuring that the point is located properly. Both uses will be covered in this video. For advanced users or those wishing to become advanced users, the sketching application is like a compact version of CAD, and an entire building can be drawn accurately in 3 dimensions based off blueprint dimensions. Afterwards, you can calculate volume, area, and much more information based off your drawing. All survey software has some form of the same application, and they all do the same thing, with different ways of arriving at the same results. To describe it in its most basic form, it is coordinate geometry simplified so that the software does all the calculations for you. Let's begin by covering the intersections function. Notice that the third button from the left on the bottom of the screen has changed from the Instrument Setup button to a new button not previously covered in other videos. This is the Sketching Functions button, and it only appears in this application. The tools in the toolbox will change to match the function chosen. You must choose your function before you can select the tool you want to use from the toolbox. To use intersections, we must choose Point Creation from the Sketching Functions. Now we open the toolbox and select Intersection. Now I'll simply touch any 2 lines on the screen, and you'll see that the software calculates the intersection. If you selected the wrong lines, touch the eraser in the lower right corner. This time I want to show you that you can select points to create the lines, and the software will draw the lines between the points for you and calculate the intersection. The dashed lines represent the direction of the lines proceeding infinitely. Notice that by selecting either lines in the background or points creating the lines, you can create any intersection regardless of the angle, as long as they intersect at some point. The lines do not have to be perpendicular. Now to store the point for field use, we would touch the green check. But before doing so, we need to deselect the Connect Points button that is highlighted green above the green check. If we leave this button activated, it will leave behind points and lines that show how we arrived at our newly created points. Unless you need to use those points or lines in the future, always deactivate the button by touching it so it turns gray. Lastly, before touching the green check, let's make sure this point is created as a control point, since that is the most common use for creating intersections and offsets for our line of work. If the point you are creating will not be a control point, don't select Control Point from the toolbox. To create it as a control point, open the toolbox and select Control Point. Now touch the green check and the point will be created. If this was the incorrect location, open the toolbox and select Delete. Touch the point you created and then touch the green check to delete the point. Now let's cover line and offset. This function allows you to create a point in any direction, at any distance, and at any angle, as long as you first define the starting point for the distance and a second point for the direction. We'll first select point creation from the sketching functions, and then select line and offset from the toolbox. Like intersections, you can define your line either by touching a line in the background or by touching 2 points that define the line. Personally, I always use the point so that I have a specific starting point for my distance, but I'll show you both ways. First, I'll use a line in the background. Notice that if I select a line in the background, my starting and ending points are always the ends of the line selected. When using grid lines, this doesn't work for creating an offset from a control line intersection, and that's why I use the points to define the line instead of the line itself. If I'm creating a point that should be located inside a wall or a specific distance from a column though, this works perfect. Notice when I select a column or wall that it gives me the corners. The green flag is my starting point, and my stations will be calculated from this point. Stations are distances moved forward or backward along the center of the line. If I wish to start my measurements from the other corner, I can touch the button above the eraser in the lower right corner of the screen, which is Flip Line. The upper box with the arrow over the center of the line is my station. If I want to move 6 inches towards the checkered flag, I can touch the box, type 6 inches, and touch the green check. Notice that the software calculates the point to be created 6 inches from the green flag. If I meant to go 6 inches backwards instead of forward, I can touch the station box and make the 6 inches negative. Positive is forward, negative is backwards. The box below station is offset. I can go either left or right of line. Notice that the symbol shows an arrow pointing away from the line perpendicularly. Let's go 6 inches right first. After touching the box, type in 6 inches and then touch the green check. Now let's say I meant to go left. I'll touch the box again and make the 6 inches negative. Right is positive, left is negative. Once you're satisfied with the location of the point, touch the green check in the lower right corner of the screen and the point will be created. If you're understanding how the function works so far, you should see by now that you can choose any line, any distance, any direction, and any angle. I'll select 2 points on an odd angle to give you another example. Touching the eraser clears my current selection. Now I'll repeat the process a couple times so you can see how you can choose anything and create whatever points you need. Now that you've seen how the application works, let's cover real-world uses. We know that we must have a minimum of 2 control points to use the Setup Anywhere function. A lot of times on working decks, we're faced with a situation where we only have one control line intersection when we first get up on the deck. Either that or the other intersection is covered by rebar bundles or other material. To get around this, use your tape measure to measure an offset from the intersection snapped in chalk line on the deck. You'll want to make a mark directly on the chalk line as far from the intersection as possible. Bear in mind that you still need to use proper survey fundamentals when creating your offset and setting up your total station. Please see video 16, Setup and Survey Fundamentals for review, or contact me directly if you have any questions. After you've measured and marked your offset, you'll want to use the tools that we've covered in this video to create the point at the same offset you measured on the deck, so that you have 2 points to use for your Setup Anywhere function. I will now use the simulator to show you an example of this. Let's say we've arrived on the deck, they've flown the tables up, but the only marks that we have fall in this area inside my mouse. We only have one control line intersection, and we need 2 to set up the total station. This is where we could lay our tape down along this line, or along this line, make a measurement, and mark directly on the line. Let's say we measured 20 feet in this direction from this intersection. Now we need to create the point in the software so that we can use the total station and shoot both points to set up. The easiest method for doing this is to go Point Creation, Line and Offset, click on your first point, then click on your second point, and tell it you want to go 20 feet. Be sure to make sure that this is highlighted as a control point. You want to deactivate this button and then click the green check. Now if you set your total station up, you can measure both points and be able to set up. Likewise, if I wanted to create 3 points instead of just 2, I could measure 20 feet up this line. While I have the same 2 points selected, I can come in here and set my station to 0 and make my offset 20 feet right. Now I have a point up here. Obviously, there are many different methods of using the same tools to accomplish what you need in the field. The goal of showing you the basics is for you to take this information and practice on your own to overcome obstacles you encounter in the field. Lastly, I'll show you how we can use the same tools to create layout points when we encounter changes that need to be made. This allows you to ensure your points are located properly instead of just looking at the background and hoping the point you're marking falls inside a wall. Also, by creating the points, you're creating data that can be exported and sent back to the office for either as-built purposes or quality control checks. I will now use the simulator to show you an example of creating layout points. As an example, let's say that one of these points up here needed to be inside this wall. I'll clear my previous selection, and this time I'll select a wall line. If I want to come from this corner, I need to flip the line so the green flag is here. So if I needed to come 1 foot up and 3 or 4 inches over, I would go station, 1 foot, and then offset 4 inches. This is going to be left of line, and it'll put me inside the wall. At this point, if I need to give it a code, I can click on Code, go into my toolbox and say New. And if I know exactly what this is, say a 2-inch conduit, I can type that in, click the green check, give it a recognizable symbol, and then click the green check. Now when I store this, I left it as a control point. I should have unchecked control point. I'm going to delete, uncheck control point, select my line, and this time it's stored with the correct symbol, and there's my description. So now when I come back to lay out, I can shoot that point and know precisely inside the wall. It's important to remember that any points you create in the sketching application belong to the job you're currently in when you create them. This is important for control of their visibility. As an example, if I create a control point or a layout point that I want to use on the next floor, and I create it within the level 1 job, then when I'm on the next floor, I have to go to my layer manager, scroll down the list to jobs, and turn on the visibility of that point within the level 1 job. Here is an example of that. This point and the control points that I created were both created in the level 1 job. If I go to level 2, none of those points are visible. If I open my layer manager, I can scroll down to jobs, drop the list for level 1, and there's my 2-inch conduit. Now that point is visible. This concludes the video covering the sketching application. Please continue to the next video, which will be covering export found on the home screen.